Coming up today on Locked On at Texas Tech, the Red Raiders in 2024, and one word to describe the big picture. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks for making us your first listen. And today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you. Hope you had a great weekend. Fun to be kicking off a new week always, because it means one more week is behind us. Sans football. So we're inching closer and closer and closer. We're now into the month of June, which means fall camp is less than 60 days away. So we're doing some looking ahead partially to the 2024 Red Raiders this year, but our conversation will probably involve some looking back as well, because we are only men. We are impacted by the past as much as we might like to leave it behind. It will influence some thoughts, obviously, and wanted to run through an exercise with you today, Chris. Heard some conversation that was basically trying to generate a one-word descriptor for some Big 12 programs heading into 2024. And I want to get into some of yours. I'll have some to offer up as well. But to kick the conversation off, the word that was used in this conversation for Texas Tech was rising, R-I-S-I-N-G. How do you feel about the Red Raiders being described possibly as a team that is rising in 2024?
Yeah, when I heard this conversation, I was as curious as anybody, and this is a fun exercise because there's no necessarily right or wrong answers. It just depends on what kind of way you want to take it, on what is more important to you, I guess. But the way it was described is that, and the premise is that, back-to-back winning seasons, I think, recruiting classes that are starting to make news and be ranked. And I think that Joey's energy is something that people, not just locally, but regionally and even further, pick up on. And I think you feel like too that there was a lot of chatter about this football program a year ago. And while some point to it and say disappointment, others point to it and say, well, yeah, disappointment, but when you're playing as many quarterbacks as they did, I can kind of rationalize and understand. Now, that wasn't necessarily the case when you dropped the Wyoming and the Oregon games, early on. You didn't have quarterback issues at that point yet. But I think that in totality, the point was made by the folks that I heard talking about this, was that it's just generally speaking a program that's rising, because I think you can factor in the recruiting part. You factor in the Joey McGuire just part that people really are looking for reasons to buy into. Yeah. And while it doesn't count as far as wins or losses, I mean, you'd be naive to think that people aren't paying attention, or people are paying attention to the, when you drop $250 million into a stadium project that's just one end of it, that turns heads. And I think that it's generally speaking about a program that's trending up, back-to-back winning Big 12 records and all those things that Joey had accomplished, when we've documented on this show multiple times that it had been a minute since some of those things had happened. So that's why I think they went with that. I tend to agree with it. I wouldn't have gone that way. I would have used something different, maybe more specific, and we can get into some of those ideas. But I don't know, what was your thought about rising?
I can see why. And really there's nowhere to go but up, given the previous decade of almost total irrelevancy we all had to suffer through together. We've been patient. We've been good folks. Father, please let this decade hold something different. And it's kind of wild to think about. We're already halfway through the next decade and still trying to come out of, the cellar and get off the doormat and all those things. I do think it is fascinating back to the Joey McGuire component, just how much one guy's energy and belief and the presence he puts forward can really impact everyone else. And this shouldn't be any surprise. The energy you carry, others are going to feed off of, for better or worse, whether you're walking into your office or into your home after you've been at the office or whatever it might be. Everybody around you is going to feed off of that whenever you're in a position of leadership and people are looking to you, kind of for a direction as far as the vibe is concerned. Because Chris, when he showed up, obviously you hadn't packed in recruiting classes just yet. I guess technically when you get into his first year, you had just won a bowl game, which obviously felt good. And I remember talking that offseason, however, about like a program that had so much energy around it and seemingly like good, positive momentum. And I kept reminding myself as a fan, we just fired the coach. We're coming off of a year where you're making a coaching change, and it didn't really feel that way somehow. I guess that may speak to the previous administration and how fans felt about that change. We were glad a change was made, but it was just kind of bizarre. But really since day one, even without some results to show for any of it or back up some of that positive feeling, Joey McGuire's put that forward and kind of created the energy or the atmosphere, I think, himself. I know it's not just him alone, but he's largely responsible for that. And I'm still just kind of wowed as a lifelong Tech fan. We've seen him come and go, and some have created some excitement, I guess, or maybe there's been some positive momentum out of the gate. But I don't really remember anything like this. So it's kind of fun to get a few years into it. There is a little bit of momentum, though we'll get into some of the disappointment, obviously, of the previous season. But it's just kind of wild to see what one guy's energy and attitude can kind of do for the atmosphere around a program entirely and a fan base entirely.
He's a unifier. He's trying to think of a better word for it, but at a time when your program fan base was broken, was being pulled apart, was kind of like different page. I don't know. And Joey wasn't a unanimous, overwhelming favorite of a hire either. People may look back on that at some point and have a different opinion now than they did originally. But this was a bit of an outside the box addition, and I think it was criticized by many, and other people it was praised by many. But I think this is partly why he was hired, is because of what we are talking about now. He had a vibe about him. He was somebody that could bring people together, and I think that's partly why people choose to look for reasons to buy in, believe in the program, and buy tickets. And he handles himself extremely well in every setting, and he's one of the most likable people, he and his wife are, that you'd ever want to be around, and it doesn't really change. And I've seen him frustrated, and I've seen him downright angry, and I could use some different terminology there, but don't mistake his being nice and his approachability and all the different things with that he doesn't coach hard or he doesn't get fired up, right? Because that couldn't be further from the truth. But what he shows the public, what the public sees, and what his players see 98% of the time, and even when he has to get on his guys, I mean, it's not personal, or anything like that. But I think this is a big reason why you see some folks choosing to view the program as rising, and not just unifier, but I think the recruiting part of it is a big deal too. That was also broken. That was also the other main component on why he was hired, and that on paper anyway, proved to be something that he's good at. Now it's just a matter of getting it done.
Yeah, he's lived up to that, and there are reasons to believe the program could have some positive days in the near future. But obviously, you got to make it happen between the lines, or what goes up must come down. And as you're rising as a program, if you're not stacking it with wins in the regular season and doing something interesting in the postseason, you'll be falling. You'll be a falling star, so to speak. All right, let's get to some of our own thoughts whenever you try to come up with a word. And we've got a couple of different options, I think. And I'm curious to hear from the listening audience as always. So let us know what you're thinking out there as far as a word in the YouTube comments, because I think some could go negative or skeptical. Some could go positive and like hype train. I'm all bought in for this upcoming season. But as it relates to the 2024 Red Raiders, what are some of the first words that come to mind for Chris Level? What do you think? First, today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else, and it does it all while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within only 24 hours. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free today. Terms and conditions apply. But as it relates to the 2024 Red Raiders, what are some of the first words that come to mind for Chris Level? What do you think?
Yeah, and we'll get to an obvious one at the tail end of the show, but like a couple of ways that I kind of thought about this, like words that I would have used. In a way, they're kind of the same thing, but they're really not. I had two different words that came to mind that, other than the elephant that we'll get to in a bit. But one word is one, and ONE, and you're thinking, okay, what does Chris mean when he says one? Well, the one score game, because you were, let's see here, 4-0 in year one in one score games. You were 3-3 last year, so Joey is 7-3 total. You lost the first three of those one-score games last year, and everybody is just angry. They're frustrated. Well, you part of your finish of your season was winning the remaining three of the one-score games you were involved with: TCU, Kansas, and Central Florida. And that first year, it's a 4-0. I think it's Oklahoma, it was Texas, it was Houston, and the other one escapes me. But it was Iowa State in Ames is what it was. Those are the one-score games. And so if you tell me that in one-score games you're going to be much more like year one than year two this coming year, that's kind of, probably going to determine whether you're really good and a Big 12 title contender, or you're just kind of trying to get bowl eligible and kind of hanging on, and there's some frustration amongst the fans and team and coach and everything, right? So that needs to be – and it's hard to win those. It is hard. You're in a one-score game for a reason. So the best part would be not to put yourself in those situations, just blow everybody out. But that's Captain Obvious there. That would be two words. And I can give you the other one too, but I kind of like to hear. Hear what you have. I think
you're touching on something that was a bugaboo for the two previous eras. And I can't even remember far enough back to think about Tommy Tuberville, but I remember it was a very consistent point of contention through the Cliff Kingsbury tenure and the Matt Wells tenure, that you would get close to getting over the hump, but you wouldn't. You'd be in some close games, in one-score games, but you wouldn't get a win. Obviously, 4-0 feels great. 3-3 feels okay, but 7-3 through the first 2 years in those situations overall feels really good for this Tech fan, because I don't know what the margin for error is for most programs across the country, but I know for Texas Tech it's typically razor thin, so you would anticipate being in these tight spots in the fourth quarter. And I don't know what the magic recipe is or what the secret is to success in those situations, but Joey McGuire and his staff were able to find it. I mean, the evidence is what the evidence is through the first 2 years. So that was a big-time frustration in the previous decade, going back to Coach Kingsbury and Coach Wells, when maybe you felt like, okay, are we making some headway as a program here or there? Maybe you're in some games that previously you were getting blown out of, but then you wouldn't actually take home a W. And that's all that matters at the end of the day. Ties and getting close and kissing your sister and horseshoes and hand grenades and all the sayings that go with that means you did not go home a winner. So that was a tough pill to swallow, and I would certainly credit Coach McGuire and company for finding a recipe that's been successful more often than not. Even though it hasn't been perfect, you have been far more successful than you were previously. And I expect to be back in these situations. So I like that word to focus in on for Texas Tech in 2024. Because one thing about the expanded Big 12, Chris, I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm really anticipating a league that is maybe more consistently filled with parity than any other power conference in the country. I mean, which could lead to a lot of fun, but is also going to lead to a lot of nail biting and probably some really stressful situations to close out a Saturday ball game. But I'm kind of thinking this is going to be parity HQ as far as college football conferences are concerned.
Yeah, this should be a wide open league, and that's what makes it fun, and that's what makes each one of these games meaningful, because not everybody plays everybody. There may be a result of a game that between two teams that you're not even playing that it is very impactful to not only you, but the conference race and who gets into the league championship game and all those kinds of things. But I think that people look at it and go, there's no clear-cut favorite. Yeah, Utah's gotten a lot of talk. Kansas State's gotten a lot of talk. You've had Kansas and West Virginia and Oklahoma State getting some chatter, but nobody is going to come to an agreement on a consensus. They are the favorite, and they are the team to beat. It just doesn't really exist, and so much of it is schedule based. But my other word here is that this is the not so good part about like the one score situation that we talked about, 7-3. My other one is, because if you tell me that you go 3-2 or 4-1 in these deals, I can guarantee you're going to have a phenomenal year and probably have a chance to be in Arlington playing for the league championship and a spot in the playoff. If you go 2-3 in this deal, then there's no chance at Arlington, and you're just kind of at that point hoping that you've won the majority of your home games. But my word here would be road. That's been one of the issues that Joey's been very frustrated with. You are 3-8 on the road in true road games. Now you've won bowl games away from home, but I'm talking true road games. Year one, you won the one at Iowa State in Ames when it was none degrees as far as the temperature goes. You won a 14-10 game there, and then last year you went to Waco and then Lawrence and pulled off wins. And so you were 1-4 in the first year, 2-4 in year two. That equals 3-8. And you've got 5 road games this year. And honestly, on paper, none of them are easy. All are to be celebrated for different reasons. Washington State, Arizona, who I didn't mention is a favorite a second ago, but should be included in that tier of teams that are going to get a lot of chatter and a lot of hype based on the phenomenal year they had last year. Their quarterback is back. They have arguably the best receiver in the country on their team. And so Wazoo from the Wyoming, just PTSD of that trip, North Carolina State the year before. The non-conference road game has been tricky for you. So Wazoo, but then Arizona, but then these 3 conference games. Yes, you won at Ames the last time you were there, but prior to that, it had been a nightmare for you. I think TCU, you've had some success there, but that's not going to be easy at all. And then Oklahoma State, who is also kind of in that upper tier of teams. And that's, I guess, the game right before Thanksgiving. And we know what kind of year they had last year playing for the conference championship with so many folks back. Offensive line back, their quarterback back, and Alan Bowman, Ollie Gordon, their top receiver. They have arguably the best linebacker core in total in the conference. So, I mean, that's where teams earn rights to go to championship games, is if you can go win away from your place. But you've got 7 of them at home, but it's those 5 road games that are really going to determine whether you play in Arlington or not.
Yeah, that's a challenge for every program, obviously, in the country, is to try to be consistently good home or away. We don't all get to meet up with a big-time opponent, major game next to the Tilt-A-Whirl at a carnival every year, so not all of us can be that lucky. Some of us do actually have to go road after road after road, and it's for real. But yeah, that's the I don't know, is that the thorn in the side sort of the McGuire era so far, is possibly trying to find that success away from Lubbock?
I think so. I think that's what maybe bothers him the most. I think that the one score thing was bothering him early on last year because they'd been so good the year before, but then you see them rattle off 3 in a row, and you kind of have a 500 record there, and so you don't feel. But it's winning on the road has just been something that it's a thing until it's not. But most teams struggle there, honestly. But this is the one thing you could point to and say, what takes you from good or pretty good to great or to legitimate, and it's winning away from home consistently.
There was kind of 4, I guess, items that I wanted to see a box checked as far as revitalizing the program when he was hired. And I'm sure that you could make a much longer list than this, obviously. But you're thinking about restoring home field advantage to Jones Stadium, having a good run at home. I think you've checked that. You think about winning tight games. You're just mentioning the success you've had there. I think overall you've checked that. Getting better as the season goes along, finishing a season better than you started it. I think you've checked that over the last couple of years.
Yeah,
winning away from home is one that has remained unchecked. So we'll see if they're able to do that in year number 3 under Coach McGuire. All right, before we get to the elephant in the room, I got a pair of words for you here that are sort of on the positive, warm, fuzzy end of the spectrum, but then maybe the dark end of the street. And I think they tie together sort of hand in hand. First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, and it's do or die time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, player props, money lines, and a whole lot more. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I got a pair of words for you here that are sort of on the positive, warm, fuzzy end of the spectrum, but then maybe the dark end of the street. And I think they tie together sort of hand in hand. So the first one I'll throw out, let's get to the warm fuzzies. Talented, sort of a question mark at the end of it. Talented. I almost feel like we're looking at a team in 2024 that has got a longer list or a deeper stockpile of outright talent than I can remember in quite some time. And it's still, compared to some of the best programs in the country, may not be that deep of a stockpile or that long of a list. But in the context of Texas Tech, say over the past 15 years or so, I look at some of what you've done, and there was another word where I kind of thought lopsided or uneven, because I may focus more in on the offensive side than the defensive side for this conversation, unfortunately. But you think about some of your skill position players, Chris, and obviously what you got in your backfield, but then what you added among your pass catchers. And clearly we know what the recruiting results have been on paper. We're now beginning to see those bubble up to the surface, and we'll see if that talent can shine through. But that's a word that came to mind. I think there is, at least to some degree, a level of talent on this roster. Right now it's just stored potential. Obviously it's got to come to fruition and actually make things happen. We'll find out if it does. But I do feel like there's a talent conversation possibly to be had about this team that we hadn't really been able to have for quite some time. Am I off? Am I on? How do you feel about that part?
I think just look at the talent they have that's not even on scholarship. That should tell you a lot of what you need to know about the conversation or the point that you're bringing up. I mean, you just look at all the guys on the depth chart or the guys expected to play that aren't even on scholarship. And I think, yeah, you're right. They've tried to check, add a ton of depth and experience and all those things. And I don't know if you have a first round draft pick sitting on your team at all right now, but you are deep. You are talented. You're not beholden to one. If one player goes down, I mean, Taj Brooks would be, and Baron Morton would be the closest to that. But you've really tried to, protect yourself just with talent and experience, and especially have used the walk-on component to really add a lot to that, as we've seen in the last 6 months when you started seeing guys rolling here in January, and even recently with MHP and you see, Jackson Hughes and all those kinds of guys, those late additions, they're non-scholarship guys that could be playing for other people. I mean, this was a Houston and a South Carolina player that were going to play for those guys, and now they're not. They chose to be on your roster, but I think it's a great point.
Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard, right? We all know that saying. So again, that's why I say it's like stored potential, but it's floating out there in my mind that you are looking at a roster that's maybe got a degree of just outright God-given ability we haven't had in some time. Now, the thing that goes hand in hand with that, my other word, hollow, because we're talking a lot of talent, and I ain't talking offensive line. I ain't talking defensive line. Now, maybe something will, again, bubble up to the surface that has me talking that as we get into the fall. But those are the groups that separate the men from the boys as far as football teams are concerned. It's been that way since the dawn of time. I know that everybody that hates football wants to outlaw physicality, and someday we may not even have offensive lines and defensive lines because we're just running around with flags on our belts. But in 2024, there is still room for those guys to move other men against their will off their spot. If you can do that, you're going to consistently be competitive, I think, in whatever league across the country. If you can't, you may be flashy here or there, but are you competing for anything interesting? So you can kind of pair the talent conversation, I think, Chris, at least in my mind, with a wonder about, well, is it hollow as far as the team is concerned if you're not really talented or capable in the trenches? You know what I mean?
Oh, I definitely know what you mean. And it's I think it's fair to wonder. It's a great point. I don't know how I would quantify how good you are going to be really on either side of the ball up front. I don't think you'll suck, okay? But are you going to be championship worthy, win on the road worthy up front on either side? And I think they have depth is not a problem. I think that experience isn't a problem. I just wonder how good or talented you are truly at the end of the day up front. And there'll be many games that kind of bear that out. And that's where when you add James Hansen and Davion Carter and all these portal additions that are seniors, they're checking the experience box. They are checking the can fill play a bunch of snaps and all that. But how did you upgrade? Did you downgrade? What grade are we at on it? And I think that's a bit of an unknown right now.
Yeah, we're going to find out. Just a little less than 90 days from now, we'll begin to find out, I suppose. All right, before we get out of here, the elephant in the room. I think this could be a popular choice for the first thing that comes to mind for anyone when thinking about the 2024 Red Raiders. And what is it, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, if you were this is an obvious, and honestly, you could do this same exercise and use the same word for a lot of the teams in the league, but even more so here. But I guess my word for the 2024 season would be barren. If he is healthy and plays well, you're going to have a good year. If he's not healthy or doesn't play well, you won't have a good year. The end, right? Yep. I think, and there's a question there. That's why some are choosing to, I think either buy in because it's like, surely the do theory will hit and you're going to have a quarterback that's finally healthy all year. Or others are saying it hadn't happened in a long time, folks. And it doesn't matter what you got going or what you have at wideout or what you have at running back. You can't win big if you don't have a healthy, consistent quarterback. I don't care how good Cam Brown may or may not be. It's just not. It's not reality in trying to win a league or contend to win in a league if you don't have a guy that is playing well. And what quarterbacks typically do is that they'll make a play or three on the road. They'll convert a third down. They'll make an unbelievable play to score a touchdown to stop momentum or to put a team away. They have the most to do with wins and losses. That's why everybody talks about, the quarterback is QB1 and all the way that position gets talked about. But if you're having to play a second or a third quarterback again, I don't care who's blocking up front, what play you're calling, how good your defense might be. You're probably going to be in a bit of trouble, and we've seen that movie way too many times, and I don't like the ending because the ending sucks.
Yeah, and I'm starting to lose faith in this do theory. I got to be honest.
I know it's like at some
the do
point,
theory.
Yeah, you flip a quarter, and it's like, I mean, it can't just land on heads every time, right? I mean, at some point you got to get the other side. Jeez, man.
If it's a Texas Tech coin and one side is an injured quarterback, it's been going that side year after year after year. But that kind of ties into, to a degree, some of what we've already mentioned as far as some of the challenges you faced with protecting your quarterback. So will some of these things change as far as the negative? Will some of these things change as for the better, or will they remain the same as far as the positive in 2024? Only time will tell. Please let us know what you're thinking as far as a word to describe Texas Tech heading into this 24 season. As I mentioned, the best way to help us grow the show is to comment anything below on YouTube. So get in there and mix it up. Appreciate those that do. And Chris, appreciate your time as always, man.
And if you have your one-word answers, we'd drop them in there, and we can discuss on a future episode and see kind of what if we agree or disagree or whatever. I'm sure everybody's got a different opinion there. That's what makes this kind of exercise like this fun. But please subscribe, and thank you for watching. And hopefully everybody enjoyed or enjoys their Monday and has a good start to the week.
That's right. And we'll see you on the other side for another edition. Appreciate you being out there. Like Chris said, get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. For Chris, I'm Casey. Hope to see you for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.